Trump has been in control of Cuba and possibly thinking of making it the 51st state of the United States. As we know, since early 2026, the United States actively began blocking oil tankers heading to Cuba. This effectively created the first major naval blockade of the island since 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The Venezuela factor of all this, following a dramatic US military operation that ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro in January 2026, Cuba lost its primary supplier of cheap subsidized oil.
We'll put some of the photos of Maduro being captured in the Nike Tech fleece.
The third country pressure. In late of 2026, Trump signed Executive Order 14,380, threatening massive tariffs against any country supplying oil to Cuba. This successfully forced nations like Mexico, state-owned Pemex, to temporarily halt their oil shipments to the island.
You got to keep in mind, tariffs basically affected everyone when Trump was implementing them. Some of them are still there. I saw some laws that they're trying to remove them, but Donald Trump just keeps implying the pressure for tariffs. So,
yep. The fuel blockade has pushed Cuba into its worst energy crisis in decades, triggering multiple total nationwide electrical blackouts and critical fuel shortages. As we'll see, we'll pop up some videos.
So this is Cuba, and there is no electricity anywhere because there's no oil, there's no energy. And this is what it looks like. Except that hotel, because it's a 5-star hotel. That's it.
The law overhaul. On May 1st, 2026, President Trump issued a major executive order invoking the international emergency economic powers. This represents a permanent structural shift from the traditional Cold War embargo. By using IEEPA, the US implemented secondary sanctions. This means foreign businesses in Europe, Canada, or Latin America must choose between doing business with Cuba or keeping their access to the US financial system and the US dollar.
So Donald Trump's basically trying to stop people from staying in Cuba and basically wanting people to move to the US with the US dollar and just basically implement their money to the US.
That's right. The new penalties aggressively target entire sectors at once, including energy, metals, mining, financial services, and defense. We all think the government is controlling Cuba, but in reality, it's Gaza that's behind all of this. Roughly 70% of Cuba's economy, its executive president, Ana de Guillermo Lastres Morera, also directly sanctioned for managing the group's international assets. The administration immediately went after international partnerships. For example, they hit Moa Nickel SA, a prominent joint venture between Cuba and Canadian mining from Sherritt International, sending shockwaves through foreign investment circles. Under US diplomatic pressure, countries like Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and several Caribbean nations have become winding down or terminating their use of Cuban medical brigade. This directly cuts off a vital source of foreign currency for the Cuban government.
You have to keep in mind, Cuba is already technically poor in terms of like their GDP and stuff. And just for the United States to cut all power and impose tariffs on oil is massive to a country that has nothing.
Listen,
it's very nice, Cuba. I like Cuba, but
I personally think that the Cuban people, I think they'll be pretty happy if it becomes the 51st state of the United States, personally.
Look, if Donald Trump does take over, there will be massive amounts of money like going to Cuba.
Yes. It could potentially become the little Miami, Florida.
Yeah, because technically it's hot year round and it's super nice. And yeah, I mean, the people before, it's already poor. It's a poor place.
Also, Trump is making this look like a friendly takeover. President Trump publicly stated that Cuba is a failing nation, which, can you agree on that?
Yeah.
And called on the regime to make a deal before it's too late. Too late for what?
I don't know. To be fair, yeah.
It's never too late. Raising the strategic possibility of what he termed a friendly takeover. Now let's talk about the regime change of Cuba. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly stated that the ultimate goal of the campaign is political and economic liberalization, noting that the US law requires regime change before the broader embargo can literally be lifted legally be lifted.
We'll put a video of Marco Rubio talking about this.
Yes.
The misunderstanding about Cuba, Cuba's actually not controlled by the government. Cuba's controlled by a military holding company named Gaesa. And Gaesa virtually owns anything, and they own the tourist sector, they own mining, they own the gas stations, they own everything. They generate about 70% of Cuba's GDP is under the control of this military company. And they're sitting on between 14 and 17 billion dollars in assets. So you have people literally starving, people literally like power grid that hasn't been maintained in 10 years, and yet you have this holding military company sitting on these assets. And by the way, not a penny of the money in the military holding company translates over to the public treasury. So the fundamental challenge we have here is that Cuba needs to be, in order for it not to continue to be a failed state, which poses a threat to the United States, they need systemic and serious reform. They need to have economic reforms. And the question is, can they possibly reform, given the people who are currently in charge, both of Gaesa and of their government? And I think the answer is they can. I really don't believe this system is capable of reform unless new people take over or a new mindset takes hold. Now, we've engaged in conversations with them. We've offered them what I think needs to happen in order for their economy to recover. And that's the last point I would make, is I think somebody raised this issue of oil blockade. Cuba was having blackouts well before January 3rd of this year. They were having blackouts for years. And they were having blackouts for two reasons. Number one, no one will give you free oil except Maduro. That's what's changed here. What's changed here is they're no longer getting free oil from Venezuela. And number two, the main reason why they have oil energy blackouts is because they didn't invest a single dollar back into their plants, back into improving their plants. And they could have bought this equipment from any company in the world, but they didn't invest in it. Instead, they invested it to build tourist hotels that now sit empty because there's no tourism into Cuba. So Cuba's a little bit more complicated than Venezuela, but it's a mess.
The countering adversaries. Washington is using this strategy to firmly assert dominance in the Western Hemisphere, specifically looking to purge Russian and Chinese military or intelligence footprints located less than 100 miles from the American homeland. So, basically, the whole Cuba control, which most people thought was government, but no, it's Gaesa, which is behind all of this. And as we know, since early 2026, Cuba has endured a massive blackout and currently still is in one. And let me know down in the comments if you think Cuba could possibly become the 51st state of the United States. And let me know your opinions of what you think of all this. Yeah. And this was T and Matt on The Berube Show. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Take care.
Bye-bye.